Thor Total War is here, and we are breaking down the Slaanesh roster. And as you can already see, Dechala has a special place in this roster that is reserved for her and for her faction. She is absolutely overpowered, powerful, and in 20 turns you can steamroll so hard that the game stops being a challenge. And on top of her being insanely powerful, she can also boost Chaos Marauders into being insanely powerful as well. So she can roll with almost no upkeep army against everything that the game could throw at you. Just throw in some Hellscourgers into her army and she will be absolutely insane. And then we do have Masque. Masque is really good, super good at that. She has access to the dances, and the dances boost her and her faction quite a bit. She herself is a really powerful legendary lord, and she boosts the Daemonettes quite a bit too. So she could getting a doom stack of Daemonettes and demons in general, because it's not only Daemonettes that she's boosting, but also other demons. And then we do have Nakari's faction. And Nakari is by far the weakest of the legendary lords for Slaanesh. And then we are getting the Demon Prince of Slaanesh. He is a ascended mortal lord of Slaanesh. Then we do have the Exalted Keeper of Threats. And I do keep on doubting myself about the names, because they're quite long for this faction. And then we are getting the Herald of Slaanesh, and she is by far probably the weakest of the Slaaneshi lords, along with the Lord of Chaos. Then we do have a Mage Lord of Chaos, Chaos Sorcerer. And now we are going into the heroes, and Strika. He, depending on which faction he serves, he is either A tier or Dechala tier. So if he is ever in Deshala's faction, her Marauder stack is becoming even more insane. And yeah, that's that. But for the general, since in 60% of cases he is gonna be A tier, we're gonna put him at A tier. And then we do have the Cultist of Slaanesh, and the Cultist of Slaanesh is quite weak in melee, but has a great utility. Then we do have the Alluress, and the Alluress is quite powerful. So she is a spellcasting hero, but she also has really decent fighting stats. So she is good for sending against wizards of the enemy, as well as dropping the spells on top of their formations. Then we do have Exalted Hero of Slaanesh, and he is again a alright choice for your army. He can go against the enemy heroes or enemy units. Then we do get Druki Anointed, and Druki Anointed do have a superb utility because they can boost your entire army with evasion. And then we are getting a Chaos Sorcerer, which I'm actually gonna be ranking at B tier. Why? Because Alluress exist, so the Sorcerer has worse stats than Alluress, and yeah, that's basically it. And after that, we are going into the units. So let's get started with the Keeper of Secrets. And Keeper of Secrets is super strong, super good, and you will have your money worth if you recruit them. Also, they do drop spells. So, yeah, there you have it. And the Regiment of Renown version is also super strong. Then we are getting into the unit that came out with Dechala and Masque, and it's the Champions of Slaanesh. And they are absolutely super potent, super powerful, and I recommend getting them always whenever you have a chance. They will shred through enemy lines and provide insane value. Then we do have a Chaos Grinder of Slaanesh, and it's going to be S tier. Chaos Grinder of Slaanesh is super powerful, provides you with a unit that can take out enemy lords if need be. And then we do get Pretons, and Pretons have insane utility if you are going against range heavy factions. Because Preton, I do believe, has 45 missile resistance on top of having a physical resistance. So 45 missile resistance along with 20% physical resistance, which means that non-magical attacks from ranged units are absolutely gonna do nothing to Pretons. So Pretons are S tier. And also they are devastating flankers, and they cause fear, and they fly, and they are super strong. And after that, we are getting Fiends of Slaanesh, and in my opinion, they are one of the most underwhelming units in the roster, because they do have weaker stats than their counterparts, like the what was the Champions of Slaanesh, and in general they do have some kind of niche of use that could be beneficial because they do have their special abilities. But in general, I do prefer the champions always, but they do come earlier into the play because they are tier 3 and the champions are tier 4. So they can be recruited, they can be utilized, but I generally prefer not to get them. I prefer to get some good cavalry instead. And then we do have the Chaos Spawn of Slaanesh, and obviously it's overpowered, right? No, don't recruit them. They are wonky, they are suffering from Warhammer 1 problems. They are just not fun to use, not fun to have, and they cost quite a bit. They are not cost efficient. They can be upgraded by the tech tree to have insane regeneration, but again, they do not really fit well into the Slaaneshi roster either. So I would advise not getting them in general. And yeah, that's the only unit that goes into the no pleasure. Then we have the Chaos Furies of Slaanesh, and the Chaos Furies of Slaanesh are a niche unit. They are good to send against the towers in a siege or against ranged units, but Slaaneshi roster is so fast that honestly you have other possibilities to utilize against ranged units, including most of your infantry. Okay, and we are moving into the Chariots now. So overall, the Chariots of Slaanesh are good units. However, because of how the game mechanics work in Total War Warhammer 3, I am not really a fan of using any chariot units in this game. and especially if they cannot fire. So they are all going into the B tier. Like all of them, no questions asked, go to the B tier, because if they are in the AI's hands, they will absolutely shred through your lines right now because of the AI bug that I have covered a while ago. But for the player has a great chance that their chariots will just get bogged down and they will take a tremendous amount of damage out of nowhere. And also, if your entire roster is about heavy micro, I don't really enjoy having to micro the chariots even more heavily. So if their roster was a slow roster, then I would probably putting the chariots higher on the list. But since their entire roster requires quite a bit of micro, I'm dropping the chariots lower. You will just get overwhelmed if you have to micro all the units on top of chariot and then chariots on top of that, because chariots require insane amount of APM. And then we do get the Chaos Shrine, and Chaos Shrine is a unit that can buff your troops and debuff the enemy troops. However, for the most part, I'm not gonna be getting it because I am already have a Cultist of Slaanesh in my army, and Cultist of Slaanesh is later on gonna be riding a War Shrine anyway, so it's gonna be providing those buffs from here on top of the buffs that it's providing already. So it's a low priority recruitment for me, unless I'm stranded for army caps and I desperately need some buffs. And now we do have Pleasure Seekers, and they are a amazing unit. They are absolutely amazing. But are they the Dechala tier? Probably not. So they are S tier. They do have decent stats. They regenerate from passive. They are super fast. They have good charge bonus, good damage. They have 32 models. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And then we are getting into a regular cavalry, not the monstrous. And the Heartseekers of Slaanesh are super strong. Again, really good stats, a good damage potential, good flanking potential. They fit well within the roster. And then we are getting into the Chaos Knights. And the Chaos Knights, so they are not a bad unit by any mean. They do require their own building to recruit, however. And since they do require a building that I'm not really gonna be building, they are going into a B tier, low priority. Like, they are not bad, they can be utilized, even on legendary difficulty, especially considering the fact that they are stronger than regular Chaos Warriors. And also, the cavalry units got a speed buff a while ago, and they are no longer 60 speed, they are 75 speed right now. So yeah, overall they are alright. They kind of behave like the Knights of the Black Rose, but without their passive. And after that, we are getting into a light shock cavalry. And both Seekers and Hellstriders are gonna be in different positions depending on which faction they belong to, because the Seekers in the Masque faction, they are super powerful. But in the Dechala and the Nakaris faction, they are not gonna be that great. However, they are still a good unit. And the same goes for the Hellstriders. And they are gonna be A tier. They are fast, they can get their job done, they can demolish enemy ranged units. They can flank to incur those leadership penalties and those charge bonuses. So overall, I enjoy using them. Then we are getting the Horsemen Marauders. And this is the unit that I don't enjoy using whatsoever. They are the only other unit that has ranged attacks in this roster. But I do not enjoy Horsemen Marauders. They seem to me underwhelming at all times. Usually they will be either outspeeded by something or they will be just outshot by something. And then we are getting the Devotees of Slaanesh. And they are absolutely super powerful, both of their variants. And since it's the only ranged unit that you have in your army that is reliable, and also it has 25 missile resistance and 20 physical resistance, it's going to the Dechala tier of being broken. I mean, they may not have that much ammo, but they will absolutely deliver their value and then some more. And the other variant with dual weapons is also gonna be holding their own. And then we are getting the Chosen of Slaanesh, and the Chosen units are overall great. So the variant with a whip is gonna be able to be your anti-large, hold the line kind of thing. And the other one is gonna be more of a damage dealer. Exalted Daemonettes, depending on which faction they belong to, they are either Dechala tier or S tier. So yeah, they are S tier. They are super strong unit. They have amazing speed, amazing stats. They are worth every single penny spent on them. Then we are getting the Chaos Warriors, and Chaos Warriors, they are good for their tier. They are really good for their tier. They bring alright stats, especially against the enemies that the Slaanesh factions are gonna be facing early on. So overall, I recommend getting them if you are in a need. I mean, if you're playing Masque, you want to rely on demons. If you're playing the Shala, you want to rely on the mortals. And if you're playing Nakari, you want to rely on whatever you can get your hands on. And the Mirror Guard. Mirror Guard is gonna be on the same tier as the rest of Chaos Warriors. Then we are getting the regular Daemonettes, and they are, again, depending if they are in the Masks faction, then they are going the Shala tier. If they are in the other factions, they are borderline A and S tier. They are super strong. I enjoy using them. Like, if you have micro to use this army, then every single unit can be of value. Then we are getting the Sludgers, and many people will say that they are not that strong, but they do have Vanguard deploy, and they allow for the flanks that you usually cannot get otherwise. And then they can also withstand in there for a while and absolutely slay the enemies that they are facing. So they're going to S tier for me. Then the Forsaken, I don't see a utility role for them in the Slaaneshi roster, considering that almost every unit has some kind of armor piercing in this roster. So I don't really see their utility here. And then we are getting into the final one, which is Marauders. And Marauders, depending on which faction they serve, they are either A tier or Dechala tier. So yeah, they are all going to be in A tier. So there you have it, lads. If you enjoyed the tier list, consider subscribing so you don't miss the future ones. And I will see you in the shorts.